In April of 1841, Silas Rutled made an announcement that shocked even the cruelest plantation owners in South Carolina. He was placing his daughter Catherine, a 28-year-old woman weighing over 260 pounds, under the complete authority of an enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross. Not as a nurse, not as a companion, but as her owner in every way that mattered except on paper. The white society of Colleton County was scandalized, but they had no idea what Rutled was truly doing or what Ezekiel Cross would do to Catherine over the following months. By November, Catherine's body had changed in ways no one could explain. 13 men were dead, and Cypress Grove Plantation was nothing but ash. Spring in Colleton County arrived with oppressive heat and humidity that made the air feel solid. The Coombe River moved slowly through the low country, its dark water reflecting Spanish moss that hung from live oak trees like funeral shrouds. Rice paddies stretched for miles, their flooded fields worked by hundreds of enslaved people who moved through water up to their knees from dawn until dusk. This was wealth built on suffering, prosperity extracted from human misery. Cypress Grove Plantation sat on 800 acres of moderately productive land. Its owner, Silas Rutled, was not quite part of the county's elite but desperately wanted to be. He owned 58 enslaved people. His daughter Catherine had grown up isolated, educated by tutors, never quite belonging anywhere. By 1841, she was 28 years old and weighed nearly 260 pounds. Her body was swollen from years of medications prescribed by doctors who diagnosed her with hysteria and female nervous disorders. She suffered violent fits. The white society whispered about her with false sympathy. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew what Catherine had witnessed when she was 12 years old, or that her madness was not madness at all, but a rational response to living with monsters. The letter arrived on April 7, delivered by private courier. Silas opened it in his study, expecting business correspondence. Instead, he found 3 pages sealed with red wax bearing a symbol he recognized immediately, a scythe crossed with wheat stalks, the mark of the Brethren of the Harvest. The Brethren were 13 men who gathered in darkness to perform rituals they believed strengthened the land through blood sacrifice. The letter informed Silas he was in debt, $12,000, an impossible sum. Repayment would require selling most of his land and all his slaves. But the letter offered an alternative. Silas would take his daughter Catherine and place her under the complete authority of one of his enslaved men, a genuine transfer of responsibility lasting 1 full year. The enslaved men would have total control over her person. Silas would announce this publicly, explaining it as an extreme medical measure. If he agreed, his debt would be forgiven. Silas sat in his study for hours that night. He could sacrifice his daughter's dignity to maintain his own position. He wrote his acceptance by candlelight and sent it before dawn. 3 days later, another letter arrived with a name. Ezekiel Cross, age 33, purchased recently through an intermediary from a Virginia plantation. Skills included carpentry and herbal medicine. Temperament listed as quiet and obedient. What the letter did not say was that Ezekiel Cross had been selected specifically for this purpose, that his placement at Cypress Grove was no accident, that he carried his own burning need for justice. Ezekiel arrived on April 13. Silas came out onto the porch. In the wagon bed sat Ezekiel. The first thing Silas noticed was his eyes. Most enslaved people kept their gaze down, but Ezekiel looked directly at Silas, his expression calm and assessing. Ezekiel was tall with broad shoulders and lean muscle. His hands were large and calloused. The transaction completed quickly. Ezekiel was shown to a small cabin near the main house. He was told his sole responsibility was Catherine's care. When left alone, Ezekiel pulled from inside his shirt a small cloth bundle. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a piece of worn paper with 3 names written in a child's uncertain handwriting. Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth. His wife, his son, his daughter, sold away from him 3 years ago to a plantation in Alabama known for working slaves to death. He had learned they all died within 18 months. And Silas Rutled had been the one to sell them. Not because he needed money, but because he had been demonstrating to the Brethren that he could make hard decisions without sentimentality. Ezekiel had spent 2 years working his way south, deliberately getting sold from plantation to plantation, always gathering information. When the opportunity came to be sold to Rutled specifically, Ezekiel knew this was his chance. His first day began on April 14. A house slave named Judith brought him to Catherine's room on the 2nd floor. The room was large but dark. Heavy curtains drawn. The air was stale, smelling of unwashed bedding and something else, the sweet rot smell of mercury. Catherine sat in a chair by the cold fireplace, wrapped in a stained dressing gown. Her dark hair hung loose and tangled. She looked at Ezekiel with confusion, then fear, then anger. Ezekiel stood still, non-threatening. He moved to the window and drew open the curtains. Sunlight flooded in. Catherine cried out, covering her eyes. Ezekiel asked when she had last gone outside, when she had last eaten without laudanum. He told her the medicine was poisoning her. Catherine's eyes went wide. She asked why he would say this. Ezekiel told her he could help her become truly well, clear-minded, strong enough to walk out of this room. But it would not be easy. Her body had been dependent on those medicines for years. Stopping would be painful. Catherine asked why he would do it. Ezekiel met her eyes. Because I have my own reasons for wanting Silas Rutled to suffer. And the best way to make him suffer is to give him back a daughter who is sane enough to remember everything and strong enough to speak about it. Catherine asked what her father had done to him. He sold my family, my wife and 2 children, Ezekiel said. Sent them to their deaths for no reason except to prove something to people who judge worth by cruelty. Catherine absorbed this. She leaned forward. If I agree, if I let you help me, what happens then? You get well, miss, Ezekiel said. And when you are well, we decide what to do next. I have my revenge to plan. You have yours. Perhaps they align. Catherine studied him intently. Finally, she spoke. I want them all dead. My father, Judge Pelham, Reverend Crenshaw, all of them. Every man who stood in that cellar. I want them to suffer first, to know it is coming, to beg, then I want them dead. Ezekiel nodded. Then we have an understanding, Miss Catherine. Catherine stood more steadily. Then let us begin. But I have one condition. When this is over, when we have had our revenge, I want to die. I do not want to live with what I have seen and done. You will help me with that too. Agreed, Ezekiel said. Then we have a deal. Catherine extended her hand. After hesitation, Ezekiel shook it. Her grip was stronger than expected. Over the following week, Ezekiel began Catherine's treatment. He gradually reduced her laudanum, replacing it with herbal tinctures. The process was brutal. Catherine spent 3 days in bed with fever, shaking, and vomiting. Ezekiel stayed with her through it. When the worst passed, she was weak but clearer than she had been in years. Then real work began. Ezekiel had her walking short distances. He adjusted her diet. While working on her physical recovery, they talked. Catherine told him about the cellar, about what she saw at 12. She described it in detail that made Ezekiel's stomach turn. She told him about years of gaslighting that followed. Her father convincing everyone, including herself, that she was mad. She told him about the journal she kept hidden, pages documenting dates and names. Ezekiel told her about his family, about Sarah who sang while working, about Benjamin who could do mathematics that amazed overseers, about Ruth who loved flowers. He told her how Silas came to the Virginia plantation, how he inspected them like livestock, how he deliberately split the family for no practical reason but simply because he could. He smiled when he did it, Ezekiel said quietly. Catherine listened with newly clear eyes. I am sorry, she said. You are not responsible for what he does, miss, Ezekiel said. No, but I am responsible for what I do next, Catherine said. And I promise you, Ezekiel, he will pay for what he took from you. They will all pay. The formal announcement was scheduled for April 29th. 41 people gathered in the Cypress Grove dining room. After dessert, Silas stood and tapped his glass. He announced that Ezekiel would assume full responsibility for his daughter's welfare, effective immediately. The murmurs changed tone. Confusion. Several guests exchanged glances. All eyes turned to Catherine. This was the moment she could refuse. Instead, she smiled, small, controlled. I trust my father's judgment, she said. Ezekiel has been kind and his treatments help. I am content with this arrangement. Perfectly delivered. But Ezekiel saw her knuckles white on her napkin, saw the flash in her eyes, promising violence. The evening passed in awkward conversation. By midnight, all guests had departed. That night, Catherine told Ezekiel she knew where the brethren kept their records. They maintained a ledger of all activities, every ritual, every sacrifice. It was in the cellar in a hidden room. Silas would be gone to Charleston on May 14th for 3 days. That gave them 2 weeks to prepare. They spent an hour going over details. Catherine sketched the cellar layout from memory. When Ezekiel left her room, it was nearly 2 in the morning. He was fully committed now to conspiracy with a woman who was brilliant and damaged and frightening. The 2 weeks passed with deceptive calm. Catherine continued improving. She was translating sections of her coded journals for Ezekiel, filling in details about the brethren. They believed they continued traditions going back thousands of years, she explained. European mystery cults mixed with things learned from enslaved people. They twisted it into something monstrous. And the sacrifices, not always human. Sometimes animals, but other times they take people who will not be missed. Slaves with no family. Poor whites. Once I heard my father mention a child. Where do bodies go? Ezekiel asked. Swamps, Catherine said. Bodies go in and are never found. Alligators do the rest. And this ledger documents all of it. Every ritual for 40 years. Names, dates, descriptions. They keep it because they need mutual complicity. Everyone equally guilty so no one can expose the others without destroying themselves. May 14th arrived. Silas left for Charleston early morning. They waited until nightfall. The house settled. They met in Catherine's room. She had changed into simple dark clothes. They descended into the cellar. The smell hit immediately, damp earth and old smoke and something organic and rotten. The cellar was larger than expected. At the center was what Catherine called the altar, a heavy wooden table with dark stains. Catherine pressed one particular stone on the far wall. A section swung inward, revealing another chamber. The ledger sat on a wooden stand in the center. Massive, bound in dark leather with metal clasps. They spent 3 hours working. Catherine had brought paper and ink. She copied entries about specific rituals. Ezekiel documented victims. They were so focused, neither heard footsteps on the cellar stairs. First indication something was wrong was when light flared in the outer chamber. Ezekiel looked up sharply. Silas Rutled stood in the doorway flanked by 2 other men. Behind them, at least 4 more figures. I never trusted your miraculous recovery, Silas said calmly. So I made arrangements. I left this morning, yes, but I returned this afternoon and watched the house all evening. Did you really think I would not anticipate this? Catherine's voice was steady. You have been poisoning me for 16 years. And you expect me to simply accept that? I expect you to understand it was necessary, Silas said. You saw something you should not have as a child. You could not understand. I could not allow you to destroy everything. They were taken to Silas's study and locked inside. Over the next hour, they heard arrivals, voices in the hall. The brethren was assembling. Finally, the door opened. Marcus Fanning stood there. They were led down to the cellar again. This time, the main chamber had been transformed. All 13 brethren members present, dressed in ritual robes. Candles burned. Ezekiel and Catherine were positioned in the circle's center. Silas removed his hood. Brothers of the harvest, thank you for coming on short notice. We face a crisis. My daughter and her associate discovered our inner chamber. They saw the ledger. They were copying entries when I interrupted them. Judge Pelham spoke up. Then they must be silenced permanently. I disagree, Silas said. My daughter is blood. I cannot simply dispose of her. And the men represents an opportunity. He turned to Ezekiel. You want revenge on me. You want to destroy me for what I did to your family. I understand that. But what if I offered you a different kind of revenge? I am offering you membership, not as an equal, but as an associate. You would attend our gatherings, participate in rituals. In exchange, I will give you resources to destroy the plantation owner in Alabama who worked your wife and children to death. His name is Edward Gaines. If you join us, prove your loyalty, I will give you what you need to make him suffer." The offer hung in the air. Join the men who destroyed his family to get revenge on another monster. "And if I refuse?" Ezekiel asked. "Then you and Catherine both die tonight. Your bodies go into the swamp. No one will ever know. But if you accept, you live. Catherine lives. You get your revenge. All it costs is your soul." Ezekiel looked at Catherine. She gave him the slightest shake of her head. "Do not do it. Whatever happens, do not become them." Ezekiel looked back at Silas. "What happens to her?" "She returns to her room, resumes her medications, forgets what she has seen. The alternative is she dies alongside you." "No," Catherine said. "I will not forget again. I will not be silenced. Kill me if you must, Father, but I will not pretend I do not know what you are." Silas's expression hardened. "Then you have made your choice." "Wait," Ezekiel spoke quickly. "I accept. But on one condition. Catherine goes free. Not back to her room. Free. Let her leave this house. Leave South Carolina. Give her money to start over. If you do that, I will join you." Silas considered. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. Catherine will be sent north. She will be given a new identity. But she can never return. Never contact anyone from her old life. She will be dead to everyone here." "Agreed," Ezekiel said. Catherine stared at him. "No, I will not leave you two." "Agreed," Ezekiel interrupted. "She goes free. I join you. Then we have a bargain." Catherine left the next morning. A closed carriage took her away at dawn. Ezekiel watched from his cabin window. She had not been allowed to say goodbye. But as she had been escorted to her room the previous night, she had looked back at him once, and in her eyes he had seen something that gave him hope. She understood. She knew he had not truly surrendered. The 3 weeks that followed were the longest of Ezekiel's life. He was kept under constant watch. But he was also given access to the main house, to the study, to the cellar. He played the role of defeated man. But he was observing everything. On June 2nd, the night before his initiation, Silas came to his cabin. He told Ezekiel that tomorrow night he would be asked to do something difficult, something that would test whether he truly committed to this path. "Whatever you are asked to do, do it," Silas said. "Do not hesitate. Do not show weakness. Because if you fail the test, both you and Catherine die. Yes, I know she is not really in Philadelphia. I have people watching for her. The moment she surfaces, if you have not proven yourself, she will be found and killed. Do you understand?" Ezekiel said quietly, "I understand." Silas left. Ezekiel sat alone in the dark cabin. He had to participate in something monstrous tomorrow. Had to prove himself to monsters. Or he had to find another way. The gathering began at midnight on June 3rd. Ezekiel was brought to the cellar, stripped to the waist, hands tied. All 13 members waited. Silas stood at the altar's head. "Brothers of the harvest, tonight we conduct an initiation unlike any in our history. We bring into our circle a man who has every reason to hate us." He gestured. 2 members brought forward a figure bound and gagged, a young enslaved woman, placed her on the altar. "This is your test, Ezekiel," Silas said. "To join us, you must participate in our ritual. You must take the knife and make the first cut. You must prove that your desire for revenge is stronger than your moral objections. If you refuse, you die here tonight." Silas held out a knife. "Take it. Make the choice." The other brethren members began chanting. Ezekiel looked at the woman on the altar. She was crying. Her eyes found his. And in them he saw every enslaved person who had ever suffered. He saw Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth. He saw himself. He took the knife. The brethren members nodded approvingly. Silas smiled. The chanting increased. Ezekiel stepped toward the altar. The woman's eyes went wide with terror. He raised the knife, and then he moved not toward the woman, but toward the nearest brethren member. The knife flashed and buried itself in the man's throat before anyone could react. Blood sprayed. Ezekiel grabbed the fallen member's robe, threw it over candles, plunging half the room into darkness. Chaos erupted. He moved through the confusion. He fought toward the altar, grabbed the woman, cut her bonds. Run! He shouted up the stairs. She scrambled off the altar and fled. What Ezekiel did not know was that above them, Catherine had returned. She had never gone to Philadelphia. She had been hiding in the slave quarters, waiting, planning, gathering allies among the enslaved people of Cypress Grove. When she heard the commotion, when she saw the young woman burst from the kitchen screaming, she knew it was time. Catherine had spent 3 weeks recruiting. 23 people came, armed with tools from the fields. They came with rage that had been building for generations. When the young woman burst from the cellar, Catherine led them down. The brethren members, still trying to subdue Ezekiel, did not hear them coming until it was too late. The enslaved people flooded into the cellar. There was no mercy. The brethren tried to fight. Judge Pelham pulled a pistol but was struck down. Reverend Crenshaw begged for mercy and received none. Marcus Fanning tried to flee and was dragged back. Silas Rutled, seeing everything collapse, tried one last desperate play. He grabbed Catherine, pulling her to him with a knife at her throat. Stop. Stop or I kill her. The room went still. Catherine looked at her father with no fear. Do it. Kill me. It changes nothing. You have already lost. I can still escape, Silas said. You can still nothing, Catherine said. You spent 16 years trying to break me. But you failed. I remembered everything. And I am going to watch you die. She drove her elbow back into his ribs. His grip loosened. She spun away. And before Silas could recover, Ezekiel was there. They faced each other. You took everything from me, Ezekiel said quietly. My wife, my children, my life. You did it for no reason except that you could. Please, Silas said. Just that one word. Did my wife say please? Did my son? Did any of the people you killed in the cellar? Ezekiel shook his head. No mercy. Not for you. Not ever. What happened next was brutal and final. The enslaved people made sure none of the brethren survived. 13 men who had believed themselves above consequence learned that power was an illusion. When it was over, Catherine stood in the center of the cellar, surrounded by bodies. Ezekiel came to her. Are you hurt? No, she said. Are you? Minor cuts. Nothing serious. What do we do now? Now. Catherine's smile was grim. Now we burn it all. The cellar, the ledger, the evidence. We destroy every trace. But that evidence could prove what they did, Ezekiel said. Could bring justice. Justice. Catherine laughed bitterly. This is justice. The only kind we were ever going to get. If we try to take that ledger to authorities, we are hunted down. This only ends if everyone believes the Cypress Grove chapter died in an accident. Ezekiel knew she was right. Then we burn it. They spent the next 2 hours preparing. The enslaved people who had helped them left before dawn. They would say nothing. Catherine and Ezekiel poured oil through the cellar, stacked wood, placed the bodies. They took the ledger and placed it on the altar. Wait, Ezekiel said. He opened the ledger and found the entries about his family. He carefully tore out those pages and folded them, placing them inside his shirt. For them, so they are not forgotten. Catherine nodded. Then she took a candle and held it to the oil-soaked wood. The fire caught immediately. They fled up the stairs and out of the house, stood in the yard watching as flames engulfed Cypress Grove Plantation. As the sun rose over the burning ruins, Catherine turned to Ezekiel. What will you do now? Go north, he said. Use the chaos to disappear. Maybe find others who want to fight, to create a network that can help people escape. I cannot bring them back, but I can make sure others do not suffer the same fate. And I will go north as well, Catherine said. Use the money I have been stealing from my father's accounts for years. Start over. But I will not forget. I will document everything that happened here. I will write it all down so that someday someone knows the truth. They sealed the records, Ezekiel said. They will seal your testimony too if you try to make it public. Then I will hide it. I will code it. I will leave it somewhere to be found decades from now when we are all dead. She looked at the burning house. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually. They stayed until the fire burned itself out, until Cypress Grove was nothing but ash. Then they walked away in opposite directions, Catherine north toward Charleston, Ezekiel west toward the frontier. They never saw each other again. The official story was exactly as they had planned, a tragic accident. Silas Rutled and 12 prominent gentlemen meeting at Cypress Grove when a fire broke out. All 13 perished. A terrible loss. Catherine Rutled was reported to have died in the fire as well. No one questioned it. No one looked too closely. Years passed. The ruins were demolished. Life moved on. But whispers persisted. Stories told in slave quarters about the plantation where the masters burned. About the night justice came. In 1971, during demolition work, a journal was found sealed in a wall. It detailed everything. But it was coded. And before anyone could fully decode it, the journal vanished. Some say it was destroyed. Others say it was taken by descendants. A few believe it still exists somewhere, waiting. What is known is this. 13 prominent men died in a fire in 1841. Catherine Rutled disappeared. An enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross was reported sold, but no record exists. And for years afterward, stories circulated among enslaved communities about a network helping people escape, led by a man who had faced the monster and won. Sometimes truth lives not in official records, but in the stories people tell, in the memories they keep, in the justice they remember, even when history tries to forget.